Hello there, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Jenn Walker Wall here, founder of Work Wonders Careers, with one of our weekly pep talks. And today we're talking about how to build a professional network that feel in a way that feels good and with people you are actually excited and eager to engage with. I know that's not like the best title. So I'm pretty sure we're calling it 5 ways to authentically build your network. But I'm really excited to chat about this. This is actually a really important topic for me. You know, as a business owner, I'm not writing resumes for myself. I'm not applying for jobs, but I do so much in the way of networking and building relationships. That's what's really super critical for me at this point in my career. And I get so much resistance from my clients over the years, and we've been doing this for like 7 years, around asking for help and building that network and nurturing those relationships and how to do it in a way that feels good, especially if you are shy or consider yourself an introvert and aren't necessarily, excited to meet new people. If that feels a little nerve-wracking for you, you're certainly not alone. So if you're unfamiliar with Work Wonders Careers, you can head on over to workwonderscareers.com. We help mission-driven professionals land new jobs and thrive at work through resume writing, career strategy, and community. And I host these weekly pep talks here on LinkedIn because I really want to, bring people together, as you'll hear throughout today's chat. I'm a big believer that most of what we do professionally can and should be done collectively around and with other people. And I also really think it's important and critical here to be focusing on actionable ways that you can move your career forward. Hey, Pam. I think that's what most people are looking for, is like, how do I take this desire or this goal and actually turn it into something that I can take action and move forward and see traction? And that's what we really specialize in over here, is taking those big career goals, getting clear, and creating a pathway for you to move forward. So that's what we're going to be chatting about today. While I'm just waiting and giving folks a minute or two to arrive, if you happen to be watching the replay, you can forward ahead. If you're watching here with me live, you have to go at my pace. I'm sorry, but I always like to give folks a minute or two to get here. And I know there's also a little bit of a delay. If you are here, feel free to say hello and let me know where you are watching from today. Like I said, we're hosting these pretty much every week all summer long. So it's a big shift for us to go from like once, maybe twice a month to pretty much every week. And we are taking a break next week as we head into the long weekend holiday here in the US. And we'll be back on July 7th. So I want to tell you about a couple of things that are coming up later today. I will be hosting another round of Uncomplicate Your Job Search, which is our signature webinar. I used to offer this in person in Boston and charge for a 2-hour workshop. And this summer, I'm offering a couple rounds of this for free online. So if you haven't registered and you're free later today, you are welcome to come on over at 3 o'clock. We'll do it on Zoom. You can go to our website, workwonderscareers.com, and get registered for that. And I'll teach you the framework that we use with our clients to help them get clarity and gain traction in their job search. And then when we return in July with our pep talks here, I am going to have several guests with me. So I'm doing like a panel style discussion with several friends / former clients. And I'm so excited for you to hear their stories and insight and expertise. So that is called Managing a Mission-Driven Career. And the invite link and RSVP link is both on our website and here on LinkedIn. So you can find it either place. All right, Maria's joining us from rural New Hampshire. I am super familiar with the 603 area, so thanks for being here, Maria. Let me get my notes up and we can dive in and get started here. I like to, my MO is to write a lot of notes and then start this talk and completely forget about them. So I have to consciously go back here. So now that I have them up, let me start again by saying a little bit more about why I'm choosing this particular topic. I think that this is something that comes up for a lot of people. People have a lot of fears and challenges, asking for help, finding the right people who can help. And I have had to leverage networking both as a job seeker and also as a business owner. So this is something I have to use and think about and do myself. So while I'm not online applying for jobs, I am absolutely very much engaged in a lot of relationship building and relationship tending as part of being a business owner. So part of the reason I'm so excited to talk about your network and networking is because one of our core values here at Work Wonders, and one of my core values, is connection. You know, we kind of live under the idea, this is a little cultural here, that we really need to be fixing all of our own problems and pulling ourselves up by our proverbial bootstraps. And so for so many years, when I started this business, I was working solely with people one-on-one, and almost everyone had the same questions. Almost everyone had the same challenges. Almost everyone had the same concerns. And when I started doing workshops and bringing people together, you could see how much better people felt knowing that they weren't alone in their challenge. And you could also see people sharing resources and ideas and brainstorming and supporting and encouraging one another, which was just so incredible. And so in the last couple of years, we've really kind of transformed our business to like really emphasize connection. I mean, that's part of the reason we do these and we do webinars, is because we're bringing people together to do this work and to share information and to share experience and to cheer each other on. I don't think most people think of networking as connection. I think people think of networking as transactional, of asking for things, of being in rooms with lots of strangers, of, trying to get back in touch with people and maybe being a bother. I think connection is probably the last thing on most people's mind. But that's how I want to enter into this networking conversation today, by really positioning it as an opportunity to connect and be connected. If some of you we may have clients watching, we run a community for job seekers. We have a professional development network. It's very much not by accident. We can really expand our scope of resources by providing access to other people, to other job seekers and professional. This is where folks get accountability. It's where people gain momentum. It's where people start fresh. It's how people meet new friends. It's how people make new connections and get referrals and gain insight. So when I talk about networking, I'm talking about really heightening our sense of community as professionals and really seeing a community of professionals as just as critical as maintaining your resume or updating your LinkedIn profile. So with that said, I want to share just the first tip here, which I think will really help, which might be a little bit of a mindset shift or attitude change for you, depending on where you're at now. But I really think as we start to think about leveraging our network, building our network, that it can't just be about our career. It'll feel really good if we focus on getting those relationships in a good place and feeling good. So the focus on not our immediate needs, but the longer term investment here is really where the payoff is in a lot of relationships. I'll talk about short-term networking because I do think that plays a real critical role. But so many people start by telling me that they feel bad about asking. And I kind of feel like, networking and building a professional network you can leverage and feel good about isn't really about the ask. It's about the relationship. So what if the goal wasn't to make an ask, but the goal was to connect with people and to cultivate relationships with a wide range of professionals with different interests and goals, and occasionally make an ask or share information, right? And there's nothing wrong with making an ask. We should be doing that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But shifting the focus and keeping the long-term, view here, changing from can you help me do X to I would love to hear more about X is a really big, it's not just a language shift. That's a real different way to kind of set up those relationships and set up those conversations. And I really want you to think about networking as not just a short-term investment, but a long-term investment in your career. Think about what you're often asking for or imagining asking for as part of your job search process. You are asking someone to facilitate your candidacy, to put your resume in front of the right people. In my case, a lot of my relationships are from referral sources. So I have other coaches who refer clients to me or therapists who refer clients to me. People don't do this for us. They don't tell people about us. if they don't know us and if they don't trust us. And so when we put the relationship first, that's when we can really see transformational compound effects of having these relationships. So I want you to think that the value of networking doesn't always come from just the ask. It comes from the nature and depth of the relationship itself. I'm not saying you have to be best friends or close with people, but they have to know you in a way that allows them to recommend you with some confidence, and also like in a way that's going to be persuasive. Think about a hiring manager hearing from a friend that, oh, well, here's someone who reached out and I had a conversation on LinkedIn with once, versus here's someone I met at a networking event. We have since had coffee a couple of times, and I think they'd be a really great fit for your team. Two different kinds of pitches there on your behalf. And I want you to think about which one might work best. You might take either, and that's fine too. But I tend to really like the ability to have people make a really good case for me. This offers us a way to connect on a deeper and personal level when we're making this shift to really focusing on the relationship. And I really want you to like imagine having space between, if your friends and family are the people you're closest to, I want you to have a realm out here, where you're not as close, there's not as much intimacy, but there's room for professional colleagues and acquaintances. And this could look like, former colleagues or former teachers. It could look like friends that have maybe turned into really professional acquaintances. It can look like new people. But there's so much there in that circle if we kind of give ourselves permission to have folks and engage with folks in that way. Another thing I hear from job seekers quite a bit is like, I'm tired of asking for things. I don't want to be like a nag. So like, how do I remind someone what they offered to do? Or how do I let people know that I'm still looking? You don't need to make an ask to remind people that you exist. So I don't think I ever reach out to, folks in my network and say, I would love for you to send me new clients. I did that at the very beginning. But what I've really developed into as these relationships have progressed is something that's like, I saw this article and I thought it would be relevant for you. Or I heard about this event. It seems like a great, it would be a great thing for you to attend. Or we haven't spoken in a long time. How are things going? Would you like to have a Zoom call? I leave them testimonials. I refer people back to them when it makes sense, right? So I want you to really think about what it would look like for you to shift the focus from the ask to the relationship itself. The second thing that I think is really helpful to do here, and I see a lot of people start the networking process and be like, bloop, it didn't work. I tried, I sent a couple messages, or I tried it a couple months ago, it didn't work. So lesson number 2 here is to plant a lot of seeds. It is possible that a couple messages isn't going to get you on anyone's radar. This could be true for cold outreach when you're reaching out to people that you don't have an established relationship with, and it can also be true for people that you do know or do have some connection with. We've been living through very difficult times. Like people might be behind on email, might be behind on LinkedIn messages, may not be super active on the platform, and so no one is, we can't expect people to just be on your timeline here. Just like the job search, hiring process, it's not as much of a priority to other people as it is to us. And so that can kind of help us keep people's responses and timelines here in perspective. So when I say plant a lot of seeds, you may or may not know this about me. I do not have a green thumb. I come from a family of people with green thumbs. I just don't have that. All of my plants are fake. It turns out that was the best way for me to spend money on plants, was to just make sure they would last forever. And so when we're making those connections, when we're making requests of people, when we're trying to reconnect, when we're going to networking events, when we are putting ourselves in a position to meet new people or reconnect with old ones, we're not harvesting, we're planting. And so it's really critical that we give ourselves the breadth of many potential opportunities, because we don't really know, especially if you're new to this, what's going to work out. I would say as a business owner, it probably took me 1 to 2 years. And I was doing this part-time, so I wasn't like, devoting a ton of time to this, but it took me a couple of years to really figure out this is going to be a good connection for me. This is going to be a good relationship for me. I have, these are going to be my peers and colleagues. So it didn't happen overnight. You really need to give yourself some time here to establish those relationships and know that everything you try isn't going to work. And it doesn't mean that networking is a bad idea. It just means you haven't really found the right configuration yet. So your job, if you're at the early stages here, is to plant the seeds and not confuse this season with harvesting. Now, for those of you who are here and are like, I need networking to work for me now, like you're working with a sense of urgency, a couple of things to consider. Make sure your targeted message to cold contacts is like really personalized, and make sure your ask is something people can say yes to as quickly as possible, as easily as possible. So in that way, it's kind of like writing a resume. It's just a different kind of audience and a different kind of outreach there. So think about if you're writing a really long email and you're asking a gazillion questions, or you're asking for like an hour-long informational interview, maybe tighten up that ask and say, I have 3 questions. Could I send them to you? I would love to hop on a Zoom call. Do you have 20 minutes? If now's not the right time, could we circle back, later this month or after the 4th of July holiday? I think giving people a way to engage and respond is really, really helpful. So if people can say, I can't this week, it's not going to happen for me, maybe you can give them an alternative that's going to work for you. So remember, most of us need to be planting seeds pretty regularly in order to have the kind of relationships that can provide the kind of insight or connections that we're really, really looking for. The third piece that I want to share is that I think the best way to find people who are going to be engaged with you and support you is to really pursue what your natural interests and goals are. So I know for me, like when I started my business, I was just like, oh, I'll go to the biggest networking events I can find. A lot of them were free. So I could go and there'd be like 500 people. And I was so overwhelmed, and I am an introvert. So I found that whole process so overwhelming and not very fruitful. Like it's actually really hard to meet people in like a dark room when everyone's kind of pitching themselves. So what I found to be most useful, and what I often encourage clients to do, is to really hone in on your interests, on your identity, on your location, and try to extrapolate from there different groups and communities where you could potentially meet people with similar interests, some overlaps. So some of you may know I'm a big fan of Tech Ladies. So I've done webinars with them, and there's a lot of women job searching over there. And so like that's been a really great organization for me to be involved with over the years. I work with Just Us Gals, and that's like a very professional and entrepreneurial organization for me to work for. I've paired up with General Assembly, and that's been, people there are thinking about a career change more often than not. So for me, it's really made sense to think about like professional associations. And I think that makes sense for a lot of people. And also identity-based groups. Some people belong to groups for parents or for moms. And so it can be a really great way to just have some of that connection like already established and clear. Another good example might be like alumni groups. That could be really helpful. All right. Did I miss anything here? No. Alumni groups. Yes, this is another place where it could be helpful to plant seeds at first. I had to go to a lot of really bad networking events to find my people. And so I think just know that if you haven't found your people, you haven't found the right organizations, that you can go to some bad events and meet some people and you'll be like, oh no, I don't want to follow up with them. So give yourself a chance to plant seeds here too, and don't look to harvest immediately. All right. The other piece of this that's so critical and is a huge barrier for so many people is that so many people enter into the job search process feeling undervalued in their current role. And they can kind of internalize this and it makes the ask that much harder, right? It makes getting out there that much harder. And it can leave people feeling like they don't have anything to bring to the table. So a shift here that I think is really critical is to own and offer your value. Now, every networking interaction or person in your network, it doesn't have to be an even trade. It really doesn't. You might have heard me share this story before, but many years ago in one of my first jobs, I used to go out to lunch with some of my fellow office mates. And every once in a while, my friend would put a little extra money in at lunch, and she was like, I'm putting it in the pot. And then eventually, like the next week, I would put a little extra money in, and next week someone else would. It just became every once in a while, one of us, a couple of us only had to pay for a part of our meal because someone put a little extra money in. So I want you to think about engaging in a professional way with colleagues and mentors and peers and friends as putting it in the pot. We're all contributing collectively. Not everything has to be like two people evenly trading. We're all putting it in the pot and committing to this practice together. And that's how things can get shared and other people can get connected. It's not that people need to, be trading essentially. But there are some things that I think people have done, that clients have done, that I've done. I always say whenever I meet a new person, is there anything I can do for you? I talk to like a lot of new business owners and it's like, I remember being at that stage, like, is there anything I can do for you? Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns about where you're at? Like, do you want to brainstorm together? Like, what could I do to be helpful is always a question I ask. And I don't think that's a terrible ask for job seekers to make of people either when they are, given someone's gift of time for an informational interview or some brief conversation. Like, is there anything I can do to be helpful? Is there anything you're looking for? Please don't hesitate to reach out if something comes to mind, right? Like those are the kinds of things that it's totally fine to offer, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. A lot of times these things, aren't contained in little dyads. It's more of a put it in the pot kind of conversation. All right. I have one last tip. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat here. Well, that's a valuable perspective. We are planting, not harvesting, right? I know I don't know how much about keeping plants alive, but I know that those are like two distinct phases of the gardening process. So thank you for that. So here's something that I take very seriously, and this is practice your commitment. But it's really better to say commit to being practiced in this area, like commit to this as a professional practice is really what it takes. One of the most valuable things that you can offer yourself and that you can offer others in your professional world is consistency. Over the years, I have absolutely seen clients send an email, send a message to a recruiter or hiring manager and get immediate traction and have that turn into an offer. But it's not because this person picked one job or one hiring manager to reach out to. It was always part of a strategy that required consistency because they were planting seeds and something harvested, right? Like there was something harvestable. So these people, if you look at just that snapshot of like, yes, this person got a job from networking, you might think that it should happen really fast or really easily or 100% of the time. But really what I'm seeing when I take the 10,000 foot view on job seekers who use their network or build a network to look for a job is that they were successful half the time or 20% of the time in getting a response. So it wasn't necessarily, maybe you can think of it as like getting lucky, but I think of it as they were consistent in trying to generate opportunities for themselves. And there was always also some clear resonance there between their skill set and the role, their interests and the hiring in a manager. And so that is really helpful too. And I just want you all to have that context of when people say they get a job through networking, like they were probably talking to a lot of people or they got very, very lucky in that process because where I see people get success, it's kind of like applying for jobs. Like you could get a job offer after submitting your first application. But more often what we see is that people have been applying for jobs consistently and interviewing, and then they accept an offer, right? And so the result is really from creating opportunities, planting those seeds, and considering what actually harvests. The other thing is about showing up for other people. So I think it's so important to me to maintain relationships with professional connections. And I often, especially because I've had some of these, I've been doing this for 7 years. So some of these people I've been working with for many years, I am in touch with them regularly without asking them or talking to them about work. So like, I know when they have babies, I know when they go on vacation, I know when they start a side project, I know when they're looking for a job, right? And so that is when I try to be engaged and show up and, remind them, but I mean, I'm also just genuinely invested in a lot of these people, but it started that way, I think, because I really gave this practice the commitment that it deserved to really nurture those relationships. Whether you're a business owner or a job seeker, I think you can start trying to meet people and build and leverage relationships and feel very quickly that it's not working. But if you really think about what some of these relationships can do for you, not just this month, but this year or 3 years or 5 years from now, then you really have a very different perspective. And if you don't have people who can facilitate your candidacy right now, if you don't have people who will recommend you to others, like, you have to give yourself some time in this process for that trust to build. And for me, that's meant like showing up as a last minute guest speaker and trying to be available, not to the point where it compromised like my well-being or my time or anything like that, but being happy to be a backup and saying yes sometimes to jumping in and helping with someone else's project or someone else's business when the opportunity presented itself. So commitment here is really about showing up and doing the practice. And it's also about showing up and being a colleague, being someone people trust enough to put in front of their boss or their friend or their clients or their whatever that might look like for you. And, sometimes it happens very quickly, but most often it happens as a result of a good deal of time so that trust and connection can build. All right. I don't know if you all can tell, but I think I'm starting to feel as passionately about networking as I do about resumes, which, as we all know, is really saying something. But I think the bottom line for me is that so much is, I know this is telling me I just lost my internet here. I have no idea if that actually went through. Hopefully I'm still online. What matters to me, again, is not resumes, but is about mobility and empowering job seekers. And what motivates me is not networking, but having people connect and share information with one another. Those are real big, significant game changers when it comes to managing your career and managing your job search. So I want you to think about those things and in this way, because sometimes it just feels like we're doing things we have to do to check a box. But if we can kind of reframe them, there's so much more depth there. And a lot of the people I've, connected with through networking are true friends at this point. You see Cameron and I from Just Us Gals, like still working together. And that was one of the first partnerships I ever had. So keep that in mind. There's a short-term gain here and also a long-term plan that I think is actually much more valuable. All right, I have a question here. Let's see. How do you activate your network to help forward your candidacy if you are not ready for your present employer to know you are actively seeking other employment? Good question. So what I would do is pick people who don't know my employer, who aren't deeply embedded there, or who I trust to have my back and not my employer's back. And I would ask people to maintain confidentiality over my job search, but I would send samples of jobs that I was looking for and make the ask, like, could you please let me know if you see any opportunities like this, or if you hire for positions like this, or know people who hire for positions like this. I think most professionals know that your job search is almost always confidential. Like, most people do not job search publicly. So I feel like I trust the people around me to keep that kind of, secret, which isn't really secret. It's just like a personal thing. If you have concerns, or if you think you'll put someone in a funky position, then I would maybe omit that person and just be really selective about who you're asking and what you're asking for. But I really find that I feel like I trust the people in my network to do this, but I understand not everyone feels like they have those people or that they know. It is okay to look for a job. I mean, I don't want to say no one's ever gotten fired for looking for a job, because I'm 100% sure that's not true. But I haven't seen it happen to clients. In fact, I've even seen some, people, when they gave their notice, have their managers say something like, I wish you told me, I would have, been helpful. So I think it's something we really feel like we have to keep a secret, more than it's something, we necessarily choose to keep a secret. So I would just keep that in mind. I think for different people in different circumstances, there are some different options. But if I really felt super limited, I would activate only those closest to me who I trusted. I would send sample job postings. I would ask them to keep their eyes open for those kinds of roles, or ask for informational interviews or connections with people if I thought they might have access to like hiring stakeholders for those kinds of opportunities. Good question. Sorry, I always have like 8 possible answers for every question I get here. It's just that a lot of times the answer is it depends. So it's not like I'm indecisive. It's just that there's many people listening, so I want everyone to walk away with something that they feel like they can implement. Okay, so those are my relationship building, authentic networking starter tips. I anticipate chatting more about this as we go on through this year, because I do think it's super helpful. It's okay to look for a job. Yeah, it's okay to look for a job. Yeah, a lot of people do this. It is more common in some industries than others, okay? And so some people like really feel like they need to be rooted in for life or plan to be rooted in for life. But for most industries, that's really not the case. So keep that in mind for sure. I hope everyone hears that. It's okay to look for a job. So as I said, I will be off next week, so no LinkedIn Live, but if you're around this afternoon, in about 90 minutes, I'll be starting another round of Uncomplicate Your Job Search webinar. You can sign up over on our site. We'll send the link out right before the webinar starts, so you still have some time there. And July 7th, please mark your calendars. I would love to have you come see me and my friends/clients talk about managing a mission-driven career. If you are looking for interesting people and to learn from interesting people, I'm bringing them right to you, assuming everything goes well with the technology here. All right, so Pamela nodding. I know you're nodding. Oh, Anna, it's so nice to see you here. I hope you're doing well. Yes, curate your network garden. I love that. All right, awesome. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you back here on July 7th. Take care, everyone.